I am the Ascended Master Kuthumi, and I aim to give you some hints on how to deal with the heart chakra. But in order to do it the way I want to do it, I need to give you a little bit of a background and take you on a little bit of a journey. So we will start on a natural planet, a nondescript, non-specific natural planet, like the ones most of you came from. So here you are. You have grown from a very narrow, self-focused sense of identity towards a more and more broad and expanded sense of identity. Naturally, you started out in the beginning being very focused on yourself and your immediate environment. And gradually, you expanded your sense of self, and you grew to become less and less focused on yourself, more and more focused on how to help other people, how to help the planet grow. So, those of you who came from natural planets, you grew to become leaders, forerunners, those who were doing something extra, who were doing more than the average person. You experimented with various forms of leadership. For some of you, I sense that this is hard for you to believe, because in this lifetime, you haven't felt you were leaders. You have, in fact, been reluctant to take leadership positions, maybe even afraid to take leadership positions. But you must remember, this is an unnatural planet. And being a leader on a natural planet is very different from a dense planet like Earth. For various reasons, but chief among them, that on a natural planet, you will not be attacked as a leader. And therefore, you can safely fulfill the leadership position to the best of your ability. While you're still learning, looking at yourself, how to transcend yourself, but you are not attacked or put down or blamed. Because on a natural planet, nothing goes wrong. It is not that a leader makes a big mistake. It is simply that you experiment and you help raise people up and raise the community and ultimately the entire planet that is being raised to a higher and higher level of vibration. So here you are on this natural planet. You feel you have grown as much as you can grow on a natural planet. And you look around for other opportunities to grow. There are other natural planets that you can go to that are different design and therefore give you different challenges, different opportunities for growth. But those of you who are here also realize that there are unnatural planets where there's a whole different set of challenges. And so you look at an unnatural planet called Earth, and we, I could say, decide to go there. We have a certain vision, a certain goal for what we want to experience, and we are, of course, continuing this desire to serve the whole, to raise up other people, but naturally also to grow ourselves. So we decide to come to this planet of Earth, and we, of course, go through this very difficult process of first coming into embodiment in these bodies that are so much more dense than what we are used to on a natural planet. But then, of course, when we experience what it is actually like to be an embodiment on a planet like this, to be in this dense physical body that you can't get out of, you can't withdraw from, and you can't therefore run away from the situations you're exposed to. And all of us went through this first, the sense that we are being ignored by most people on this planet, but then comes the attack that we have never experienced before by the fallen beings, where we are deliberately put down, hunted, you might say, and we are naturally shocked by this. We are traumatized by this. We feel this sense of, how could this happen when we are here to help? Doesn't everybody want to grow? Doesn't everybody want to transcend the suffering that we clearly see on this planet? Don't they realize they are suffering? Don't they realize there's a way out? And why are they not taking the hand that we are stretching out to them? What is it that then happens in this process? Well, you start out on a natural planet being focused on yourself. You gradually become less and less focused on yourself until you're focused on the whole. But then you come to Earth, you are attacked, and what do? You contract. You contract in order to avoid being hurt. Again, it's natural, it's unavoidable. But the result of this is that you came to Earth being focused on others, and now you become focused on yourself again. Not the same way you were when you were new on a natural planet, because on a natural planet you were not attacked. So it's a different level of self-focus. But what I'm saying is, you contract it and you become focused on yourself. We all did this. Every one of us, no exceptions. So, as a result of this burst trauma, you now have this focus on self. The outer self, the separate selves that you created in reaction to Earth. Again, understandable, in a way unavoidable that it happened, but of course, that doesn't mean that it cannot be overcome. It cannot be transcended. Of course, it can. But the problem is that the focus on self closes the heart chakra. Because what is the heart chakra? Well, it is the open door for your divine individuality to be expressed. And what you experience is that it is not only just ignored, but it is actively put down, ridiculed, made to look like it's wrong and can only be wrong. And therefore, you feel that the most precious thing you have that you took with you from a natural planet has now been dragged into the dirt, put down in some ultimate way. And you want to naturally avoid that feeling. And therefore, as we have said, you close the heart chakra thinking you have to protect your I am presence. And then as you go deeper into these reactions, you start to think that you have to protect your I am presence from what is happening on Earth, but you have to protect yourself from condemnation from your I am presence. So you are now in this situation where, as a result of these attacks, you feel attacked from the outside, and you fear that your I am presence might even attack you from the inside because of what you perceive as mistakes you have made here on Earth. So you now have this situation where you are focused on self. And what I mean with that is you are focused on the outer self, the self you created in reaction to Earth. Now, how are you going to break out of this catch-22, where you have closed your heart chakra, and as a result of closing the heart chakra, you cannot reach your I am presence, and therefore you identify yourself with the outer self, the separate self. You see, when you were on a natural planet, it's not that you didn't have what we can call selves on a natural planet. They weren't dualistic selves, they weren't separate selves. But in order to do anything, in order to co-create, you create selves, you create structures in your identity, mental and emotional bodies that you are projecting onto the matter light. That is how you co-create. That is how we all co-create. So you had selves on a natural planet, but you were not identified with them because you were identified with the I am presence. So the selves were just a tool that you used to co-create. And as you grew, you created more and more sophisticated, broader selves that were focused on serving the whole, whereas in the beginning, you were more focused on yourself and your own growth and what you wanted to experience. So now you come to Earth and you create these outer selves, but because the heart chakra is closed and you don't have the contact with the I am presence, what do? What do? We come to identify with these outer selves. We think this is who we are. And in a sense, this is who we are in relation to Earth, because it is such a difficult planet and we have such a strong reaction to it. But how do you break this catch-22? How do you break out of it? This is the enigma that people have been facing for thousands upon thousands of years. Various spiritual teachings have been released on this planet by the Ascended Masters who were working with the planet in the past, aimed at helping people break this. The Buddha's teachings is one example, Jesus' teachings another, but there are, of course, many others. And so it is not that these teachings cannot work. They have worked for some people, but not for large numbers of people. And that is why we aim to give some teachings that can hopefully help more people break through this stalemate, catch-22, cross the gap between the teaching and what you can actually embody. And of course, it helps tremendously when you have the broader teachings we have given. Mother Mary, Shiva, but also, of course, the many teachings we have given about the separate selves and your I am presence and the conscious you being pure awareness. Because the key to it all is, of course, that the conscious you needs to stop identifying itself with the outer self, the outer selves that are created in reaction to Earth. It needs to recognize that it is more than these selves. But ideally, on a natural planet, of course, you know you are more because you have a sense of connection to your I am presence. So when you lose that, how do you then realize you are more than the outer selves? How do you connect to the I am presence? This is the central enigma. And it is an enigma that is really centered on the heart chakra, because, as I said, the heart chakra is the open door for your I am presence to express itself through you. But the heart chakra is also where you connect to other people. And so there are two ways to break out of the prison. And one of them is, we might say, the omega aspect, that you somehow make the shift of focusing on serving other people or even a cause, where you make the decision that you cannot be so focused on yourself that you cannot help other people. Many people throughout the ages have gone into some kind of service, whether through this religion or that philosophy, or just in general, they have developed this desire to help others. And when you go into this, it gradually helps you overcome the focus on self. Other people have somehow grasped that there must be more to understand about life than what you see in the material world. There must be a spiritual realm beyond the material. There must be something you can connect to beyond this earth. And so people then go into a spiritual path where they often withdraw from the world and focus on spiritual pursuits however they see it. So these are the traditional ways. But there are other ways, in fact, several other ways. And one of them is, of course, the teachings we have given, where you ask yourself simply, who am I? What kind of being am I? Am I my physical body? No. Am I my emotions? Am I my thoughts? Am I my sense of identity? What am I? Am I more than this outer? And then it is possible by this, what some call self-inquiry, that the conscious you suddenly steps outside of these four lower bodies and experiences itself without the filter of the four lower bodies. We have called it pure awareness, neutral awareness, but you have a direct experience that there's more to you than the outer selves. This means that it is no longer a belief, a theoretical concept. It's no longer a mental image that you have a direct experience. This is what has traditionally been called a mystical or an intuitive experience. Millions of people have had them. But the challenge of having such an experience is that it, of course, only lasts for a certain time, often a very short time. Then you go back, the conscious you goes back into the outer personality. And how do you now deal with the experience? You look back throughout the ages, you see that so many people have had great difficulty dealing with such an experience. Because once you are back into the outer personality, the outer mind, these separate selves that make up the ego are desperate to get you to interpret the experience in such a way that they can maintain control over you. So we might say that in order to have this experience, there's a valve, at least one valve in the heart chakra that has to flip open for a brief time so that the conscious you can exit the outer personality. Now you're outside, and then you go back in. But the experience is so different from your normal state of mind that the conscious you can actually become shocked by it. And now even the conscious you is looking for a way to explain this so that it is not too disturbed. And why is this disturbing? Because the outer personality that you have built in reaction to Earth gives you a certain sense of security on Earth. You sort of know how you fit in. You sort of know how to avoid being hurt, because these separate selves are constantly observing everything that's going on around you and seeking to identify any potential threat that could hurt you and then reject it before it actually hurts you. You find ways to explain it away, to avoid it, to run away from it, many different ways that people do this. And so you become familiar with this, and it gives you a certain sense of security where you feel you have life on Earth under some control. You can avoid being hurt. Suddenly now, the conscious you steps outside of this protection apparatus. It is almost like this nobleman in the Middle Ages who has grown up in this stone castle with thick walls, and suddenly he is catapulted out in the clear sunshine, and he is blinded by the light and doesn't know what to do with himself. And that is how the conscious you can feel after experiencing itself as pure awareness. So you will actually see, when you look at many of the spiritual teachings, even older spiritual teachings, how a part of the purpose for these teachings is to put this experience into some context where people can deal with it. And what we are attempting to do with these teachings we are giving now is, in a certain sense, the same thing. We are giving you some kind of context where you can deal with this jarring experience of pure awareness, where you actually experience that you have no personality. You have no structure in yourself as the conscious you. Because in the beginning, you will just experience being outside the outer personality, but you won't experience the presence. Because you are, so to speak, you are outside, but you're looking back towards the outer personality. But we are also attempting to give you teachings that can help you much more quickly adjust to this experience and come to the point where you can accept that you don't need to explain the experience through the structures in your outer mind. You don't need to take the worldview of your outer selves, your separate selves, and fit the experience of pure awareness into it. This is what you see so many people doing, including what you today call this non-dual teachers who teach non-duality and a state of no self. Yes, it's understandable that when the conscious you steps outside of the outer personality, it can experience that it has no self as it is used to seeing itself. But when you then interpret this from the viewpoint of being back in the dualistic selves, to mean that you should actually strive to have no self, no personality, then you are putting yourself into another catch-22 than before you had had the experience. You are bringing the experience into the dualistic mental box and explaining it there. So what we are seeking to help you do is to realize that even though it can be disturbing to have this experience of pure awareness, it is just a stepping stone to where you now, instead of looking back at the outer personality, you can look to the I Am Presence and begin in the beginning to connect to the I Am Presence, eventually, as we have talked about, leading to oneness, a sense of oneness with the presence. If you can do this, you can make much faster progress. And this is really a matter of the conscious you becoming more conscious of the entire process. We can say that traditionally, it has been said that the heart chakra has 12 valves or petals that can open or close. And we can say that for each of those 12, there is a certain illusion you have taken on that caused that valve to close. And so, in a sense, in order to open the heart chakra, you need to look at each of these 12 illusions, come to see it consciously, and let it go. Then you open one valve. And this in itself is great progress, because most people on earth have all of the valves firmly shut. And when you have one valve open, the light can flow through from your I Am Presence. And therefore, you will never again feel completely cut off from the I Am Presence. But of course, you will not regain the full openness, your full creative powers, until all of them are opened. So most of you have either at least one valve that is open or that opens occasionally and then closes again. So at least that, but many of you have several valves that are open. Some of you will feel like you don't have it. Some of you will feel like you haven't experienced pure awareness. I would say that if you are here listening to these teachings, you have experienced it, but you haven't connected the experience to the words pure awareness. In your mind, it's different. And this is an enigma that we face as spiritual teachers, that we have to communicate with words. But words are only a description of an experience, not the experience. So, no matter what words we might choose, some people will not connect those words with the experience they have had. But you can look at it this way. If you are open to these teachings, it is because you know there's something beyond the worldly teachings, the worldly worldview, and your outer personality. How can you know this? You could say, yes, I can read a spiritual book and gain some intellectual understanding, but this is not going to drive you to pursue the spiritual path. You're going to take it as a form of entertainment. But when you have made the commitment to be on the path, to look at yourself, to look at your own psychology, it is because you know there's a reality, and you can only know that through experience. So you have had the experience. And if you think you haven't, you need to try to go beyond the words pure awareness or neutral awareness and identify what form the experience takes for you. and what your outer mind might have used to explain the experience and put it into its worldview. This will be helpful for you to recognize that you have had the experience. It will also make it easier for you to have more of these experiences, because it is truly the experience that becomes the driving force on the spiritual path. And some of you come from a background where you have been programmed, we might say, to believe that a spiritual experience is some otherworldly, very dramatic experience. But in reality, there's nothing dramatic about pure awareness or neutral awareness. It is neutral. And this is, of course, what is unique about it, because nothing you experience through the separate selves is neutral. It always has a meaning that is projected upon it by the separate selves. And that is why we are saying that even the experience of neutral awareness, the separate selves will project their meaning upon it as the entire concept of no self. Or that some people feel that because they've had a certain experience, they must be very special, very advanced. And now they set themselves up as spiritual teachers and try to teach others to just have a spontaneous awakening, instead of giving them a step-by-step path that leads them higher and higher. So you need to contemplate how your separate selves have projected a meaning onto the experience of pure awareness, so you can identify what the experience is that you have had that is actually pure awareness, and not the meaning that the outer self projects upon it. Because this is what makes it easier for you to open your mind to having more of these experiences. Because you can start recognizing the meaning and disidentifying from the self that projects that meaning. And this you can do when you have these teachings about the conscious you, that it isn't the outer personality. You can then begin to see that you have had the experience and what it means. Now, there may be some of you that are thinking, but if somebody is now completely trapped in the outer personality, has closed the heart chakra, and don't have any contact with the I Am Presence, how can the conscious you ever step out of the outer personality and have that experience of pure awareness? How is this possible? Well, it is possible because the conscious you is pure awareness, and it can never lose it. That is also why we say you cannot make a choice with your free will that you cannot undo by making another choice. Because the conscious you can make the choice to go into the outer personality, but it cannot become trapped in it permanently. It can choose to go out. And here is where there is an enigma for the dark forces. Because when they expose you to some kind of traumatic situation, the more intense the situation is, the more of a potential there is that the conscious you will step outside the outer personality. You will see that there are many people who have been in accidents or other dramatic situations where they suddenly felt like They were outside their bodies, outside their normal personality. They were just witnessing the situation. They felt calm within, totally at peace, and they just allowed the situation to unfold instead of resisting it. So you see here, the dark forces also face certain dilemmas for how they can control people and sabotage your path. And the harder they push, the greater the, from their viewpoint, risk, from our viewpoint, opportunity, that the conscious you will be catapulted out of the outer personality and suddenly experience that there's a different way to look at this threatening, difficult situation than through the outer personality. And this then helps the conscious you gradually disidentify itself from the outer personality, realize there's another way to relate to these situations. So we might say that the dark forces can't stop themselves from applying force. They would, in a sense, be smarter if they could take you into separation and then leave you there. And that is what they, to some degree, do with most people on Earth who are not in the process of growing. They are stagnating. But still, when it comes to avatars, the dark forces cannot help but see them as a threat. And therefore, they will push and push and push because they think they can destroy you. They actually think they can destroy the conscious you, which of course cannot happen because you cannot destroy pure awareness that has no structure in this world. But they think they can cause you to build so many layers of separate selves that you can't free yourself from them. But in fact, the more selves you have, the more stressful your experience is going to be. And again, it increases the potential that the conscious you will suddenly have had enough, will suddenly feel overwhelmed, and therefore it slips out. And so, as we as spiritual teachers face certain dilemmas, the dark forces face certain dilemmas, because as there's no guarantee that we can help you, there is no guarantee that they can stop or prevent your growth. They cannot, as I said, destroy you. So when you realize this, when you accept these teachings and begin to use them and contemplate it, then you can come to greater and greater disidentification from these outer selves. And that can greatly be accelerated by using these teachings about how to open the heart. Now you may say, what about the other chakras? Well, there may be some of you who have such a disturbance in a particular chakra that you need to focus on that for a while because it takes your attention away from looking at the heart chakra. But if you do not have that, then focus on the heart chakra, because once you clear that, it becomes so much easier to clear the others. But you do have to start looking for these illusions. And Mother Mary's tool for looking at love relationships is certainly one way to do this. There are other tools that can be used, but really it is a matter of observing yourself and your reactions. There isn't like a magical wand I can give you, and you wave it and then you see the illusion. You have to gradually observe yourself, looking for one illusion at a time, and come to see this. But what we can say is that all of the illusions relating to the heart chakra revolve around this mechanism that you feel that the expression of your true self, your higher, your spiritual individuality is being rejected. And how do you deal with that? And there are 12 shadings of how you can deal with it. And therefore, you can contemplate this. How do you deal with rejection? The rejection of who you are. What is your general reaction to this when I say rejection? You can imagine that there is a situation where you felt rejected. How do you look at it? You can use the technique, having a notepad ready, counting down, and then spontaneously writing what comes to you. But you can also simply observe this rejection. How have you dealt with this? And then you can gradually come to see the different illusions you have revolving around this sense of being rejected. Some of you will feel like this messenger has realized that when he felt rejected, he felt it was because he wasn't good enough to help these people. So he had to improve himself. But when you are in separation, what does it mean to improve yourself? How do you, when you see yourself as a separate being, improve yourself? Well, you create another separate self. So here you are, you have the desire to help other people, you feel they reject you, you feel, oh, it's because I'm not good enough, I haven't come up with the right argument that makes them see this. So what do? You attempt to create a separate self that has this ultimate argument that will convince all people. But of course, separate selves are based on duality. How can one separate self convince another separate self that it is not real? How can one unreal self convince another unreal self that the second unreal self isn't real and that the first unreal self is real? It cannot be done. It is an impossible situation. So you think you have improved yourself, you come up with a better argument, a better reasoning process, you feel rejected again. Now you think you have to create an even more sophisticated separate self. And this can then go on until you build layers and layers of this. How do you get out of this? How do you deal with rejection? Well, what does rejection come from? You have an intent to change other people. You are approaching other people with some intent to get something out of it, that they are somehow going to accept you and what you are saying and feel that they have been helped by you. But what if you didn't have the intent? How could you then feel rejected? And so you can then begin to look at, even going back to when you came as an avatar, how did you look upon Earth and what you could do here? And as we have said before, many of you will realize when you contemplate this, that you came here with a certain intent, for example, to remove suffering, to help people overcome suffering. You see that this is even the case for the Buddha, who even after he had, as the Buddhic wording says, gone into nirvana and returned to give his teachings, the first noble truth that he formulated was that life is suffering. This shows you that the Buddha, before he came to Earth as an avatar, was focused on helping people escape suffering. Many of you were the same, but some of you had other things you were focused on. You could say suffering is very general, but many of you were focused on specific kinds of suffering, not just suffering in general. So you see that even the Buddha had some kind of intent. Now, was he attached to it? Was it a separate self that drove it? No. But nevertheless, in order to actually ascend, Gautama had to actually overcome this desire to help people overcome suffering, because he had to accept that all he could do was offer them a way out of suffering. But he could not allow himself to be attached to whether people took it or not. And it's the same for all of us. In order to ascend, we have to reconnect to what brought us here and simply let it go. Simply let go of any intent of changing other people or changing the planet. Now, this doesn't mean that you will not make a contribution to changing the planet and helping other people. Because by overcoming this specific desire to help people, you can serve as an example and you can pull up on the collective consciousness. But it is not done from this sense of wanting to change other people. Now, this may seem to be a long way around, but it goes back to the focus on self. Again, it's understandable that you were hurt, you were shocked, and it caused you to contract and focus on self. But what the spiritual path is really about is overcoming the focus on self that you went into after you came to Earth. And that means overcoming that reaction where you, for example, felt rejected. You felt that rejection of your divine individuality. There can be other reactions, but they all revolve around this sense that you were rejected for who you are. So, who were you when you came to Earth? Were you the conscious you? Were you actually pure awareness? Or was there more to the conscious you than pure awareness? Well, this is where it may seem like we are contradicting what we have said before. But we are simply giving a higher level of teaching. Take care of what we have said several times. You were on a natural planet. You looked down upon Earth. You didn't look down, but you looked at Earth being at a lower vibration. And you formulated an intent to come here based on a certain motivation. What did I say? Even on a natural planet, you create selves. And are based on duality and separation, but they are selves. So you formulated, you created certain selves that then motivated you to come to Earth. And so you came here with those selves. Are they at the level of the I Am Presence? Well, this is a delicate topic. The answer is yes and no. Because as we have said, your I Am Presence is not an ascended being, and therefore it can have certain intent, certain viewpoint that then causes you to create these selves that are not part of your divine individuality, but they are part of how you express yourself in the world. So for practical purposes, we will say that they become part of the conscious you. They become structures in the conscious you. So what does that mean? Well, it depends on how you interpret the words pure awareness. If you want to interpret it completely literally as meaning that if the conscious you is pure awareness, it has to be empty of any kind of structure or individuality, then we have, in a sense, given you a misleading teaching by talking about pure awareness. Yet, if you realize that our teaching was given to help you step from the separate self into a higher awareness, then pure awareness, neutral awareness, is simply a way to describe that the conscious you is outside the outer personality. So again, you see how words are subject to interpretation, and it depends on from which viewpoint are you looking at the words. From the viewpoint of you being inside the outer personality, pure awareness is an accurate description of what the conscious you experiences when it steps outside that personality. Because when you first have these experiences, you will experience pure awareness. You will not be able to connect to these selves, this structure that you brought with you from a natural planet. And of course, you can say that the original Earth inhabitants, when the conscious you steps outside the outer personality, there is no structure that was brought from another planet to Earth. So, in the beginning, when you experience pure awareness, you experience no structure. But as you become more experienced, as you disidentify from the outer personality, you can begin to experience both the I Am Presence, but also that there are certain structures in the conscious you, around the conscious you, that you brought with you from a natural planet to Earth. And this is what we have talked about before. You came with a certain intent. And you can learn to identify this. And when you identify it, you can come to that point where you see a certain intent. You now compare it to the actual experience you have had on Earth. And you see that because you hadn't experienced Earth, you didn't have an accurate expectation or intent for what you could accomplish on this planet. We have said before that you were used to being very accomplished on a natural planet, and we all naturally thought that we could do on Earth what we did on a natural planet. We could manifest whatever we wanted to manifest, but we hadn't experienced the density of Earth. So when you now look at your expectation, your intent, compared to the reality of how dense the planet is, how dense the people's consciousness is, how unwilling they are to change, how unwilling they are to overcome suffering, you can look at that intent and just let it go. It's like any self. You see that it's limiting you, you see that it's based on a certain illusion, and you just let it die. You let it fall away. And in the beginning, this is very difficult for all of us because You want it to mean something that you came to Earth. You want to feel you have accomplished something by coming to Earth. And therefore, you resist letting go of what drove you to come here, that built the expectation of what you could accomplish. But what is the greatest thing you could accomplish on Earth? If we look at it strictly from the perspective of the ascension of your I Am Presence, what is the greatest thing you could accomplish by coming to Earth? It is overcoming the selves, the expectations that brought you to Earth. The illusion you had when you looked at Earth and what you thought could be accomplished here. If you can overcome that, you are ready to ascend. And that is the greatest accomplishment at a personal level. Now, you may still say, well, have I accomplished anything for others? Have I helped other people on the planet? Have I helped the masters? Have I helped Saint Germain manifest the golden age? Well, if you can overcome these selves that I'm talking about, while you're still in embodiment, you can be the open door for your I Am Presence and the Ascended Masters. And then this can accomplish something for the Earth. And that is the greatest service you can give. So I know very well that what I'm talking about here requires some contemplation. I'm not expecting you to grasp this by listening to this dictation once or by reading it once. It requires a process. But you can speed up your progress if you can grasp the need to question your focus on self. This messenger has described how he has, throughout this lifetime, struggled with a sense of feeling embarrassed, of making a mistake, doing something that he thought was stupid, or that he thought other people thought was stupid. And so you all have a similar thing, similar mechanism. But what does it come from? Why would you feel embarrassed about anything you have done on Earth? Because you're focused on self, on yourself. You think there's something that you should have been able to accomplish, or there's some mistake you should have avoided on Earth. And therefore you are focused on avoiding the feeling, whether it's embarrassment or something else, avoiding that feeling. So you are constantly on guard, whether you realize it consciously or not. There are these subconscious selves that are looking at every situation you encounter, wondering, am I going to be embarrassed? Am I going to feel stupid? Am I going to feel rejected? Am I going to feel I'm not good enough? And this eats up your attention, your energy. So if you can become aware of this and start looking at it, asking yourself, why should I feel this way? Do I really have to feel this way? And you will see that it ties in with the attitude, the expectations you had when you came to Earth for what you could accomplish. Why did this messenger feel embarrassed? Because he experienced a situation that triggered this reaction that he couldn't accomplish what he came to accomplish. So he wasn't good enough at doing it. And it was embarrassing to him. He wasn't conscious of this, just as most of you are not conscious of your reaction, but that is the mechanism. So you're always focused on self, but you can become aware that you are focused on self. Because what happens is that when you are focused on self, you don't see it. You think this is the only way to react. This is the only way to look at life. This is the only way to look at yourself. But when you can become aware that you are doing this, you have already started breaking this hypnotic spell that this has over the conscious you. And you can start asking yourself, why should I feel this way? Is this the only way to feel? Is this the only way to react to Earth? You can then start asking yourself, why should you feel embarrassed over anything you have done on a planet like Earth? And if you ask yourself these questions, you will realize you don't actually feel embarrassed because of anything you have done, but because you thought you hadn't accomplished the goal that brought you here. You see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to trick you out of the focus on self. When you are focused on self, you think it's the outer situation that makes me feel embarrassed or rejected or this or that. So your attention is going out, trying to avoid what's coming from the outside. But it isn't about what's coming from the outside. It's all about what's going on inside yourself, where you feel you can't live up to your own expectation. And when you begin to see this, you can come to see that, as we have said before, nobody ever did anything to you. Nobody ever made this messenger feel embarrassed. Who made him feel embarrassed? Himself. But what self made him feel embarrassed and what self felt embarrassed? Well, of course, a separate self. And so then you can begin to see that your reaction here on Earth comes from a separate self. But even your view of what you could accomplish on Earth and what brought you here comes from a self, not separate in the same way as a separate self created from duality, but still a self based on an illusion. And when the conscious you becomes aware of this, that it is in a sense trapped between two selves, the outer self and the inner self, we might say, the self that brought you here, then suddenly the conscious you can step outside of even the inner self and take a look at this and say, why should I hold on to this idea of what I could accomplish here on Earth? Why? Why am I holding on to this? Why am I not just letting it go? And as you let go of these cells, you become the open door, fully open door for the I Am Presence. Not only can you let go of the outer selves, but even those inner selves, as we might call them, you can let go of. You have no intent for what you're going to do or accomplish or not accomplish on Earth. You are just flowing with the river of life, allowing your life to unfold. So what's there to be embarrassed about? What's there to feel rejected about? I know very well that what I'm giving you here is a teaching that requires a certain reasoning process. And there is always the danger that you can then go into this logical, analytical, linear mind, as we have called it, and try to set up some linear process that you need to go through, some linear steps and stages. But it is really my intent to help you just shift out of the selves and experience that what traps you on earth is precisely what brought you to earth. And the only way to get away from earth is to let go of what brought you here in the first place. There are the outer reactions that will keep you here, yes. But even if you overcame those, still your intent would keep you here as long as you felt it wasn't fulfilled. And quite frankly, we can never come to a point where we feel we have fulfilled our intent for coming here. Because how likely is it that in the rest of your lifetime, suffering will disappear from planet Earth? So we all had to come to a point where we were willing to acknowledge that we simply had to leave, even though we hadn't finished what we came for. That it is time to leave because we see that it was an impossible quest that brought us here. Now, does that mean that I, who is now the Ascended Master Kuthumi, wasted millions of years being an embodiment on Earth? That it made no difference at all that I was here? No, it doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean that for you either. We have made a difference by being here. We have actually accomplished something. But it was not what we envisioned when we came here. And that is what we need to come to see before we can look at the planet and say, I can leave even though I haven't accomplished what brought me here. I can walk away. There is nothing I have to do on Earth. Now, some of you may not be ready to do this in this embodiment because it's part of your divine plan that you come back after this embodiment to help manifest Saint Germain's golden age. But there will come a point where you are ready to ascend and where you have to go through this. So it is still valuable for you to have this teaching, to take it in, to integrate it, so that when the time comes, it's there and can be brought to your conscious awareness, and you can come to that point of the final release of yourself from Earth, where the conscious you releases itself from any tie to this planet, and then you ascend. You can still stay with the planet. You can say, have I, as the Ascended Master Kuthumi, overcome all ties to Earth, given that I'm still here? What about Gautama Buddha, Jesus, Master Mo, Saint Germain, Mother Mary, Kuan Yin? Why are we still here? Because when you are not focused on yourself, you can focus on the larger self and seek to raise others. But you are not doing it in order to accomplish something as the self you saw yourself as when you came to Earth. You are doing it from a completely unselfish perspective that isn't centered on yourself, even as an ascended master, because it's centered on the whole, raising the whole. And that is something you can experience in glimpses, but you will not experience it fully until you ascend. So I know this has been a long and very complex discourse. But you realize, I hope, that we are attempting to give you a higher teaching. And you cannot expect that these teachings are simple, straightforward, and can be fathomed the first time you hear or read them. It is not a teaching that is aimed at producing instant results, but of taking your path to a higher level so that you gradually produce those results of seeing through the illusions that makes you more and more free. And you have all experienced how the teachings set you free, make you feel more free. And it is simply a matter of continuing this process, taking it towards these gradually higher and higher levels until you have that final release that brings you into the ascended state. And of course, you are not walking that path just for your own sake, but because each of you are at the top of a pyramid and there are other life streams beneath you in that pyramid that will go up as you go up because you are pulling them up. And of course, you being at top of this pyramid, you are also part of a larger pyramid where there is an ascended master ahead of this that is also pulling up on everyone below it, even those who are unascended. This is how the whole progresses. Pyramids within pyramids within pyramids, rings within rings, and it all leads up to the Creator, which might be said to be at the top of the greatest pyramid of them all. But we could just as well say that the Creator is at every level of every pyramid. But that, of course, is something that is more difficult to see and that you cannot see until you overcome that focus on the self. So with this, I thank you for being willing to participate in this release that has gone into the collective consciousness and reached some people who may never hear about you, who may never hear about ascended masters or these teachings, but they can still be pulled up by the energetic impulses that have been sent through the outer vehicle of this dictation and your chakras. So, with my gratitude and my joy, I seal you in the heart of Kuthumi that I am.